I've come to Farley Mount Country Park in Hampshire to visit a monument that has stood here for nearly 300 years. Having grown up not too far from here, it's a place that I'm fairly familiar with, and it holds some special memories for me. And nearly 3 centuries ago, it held some special memories for someone else too.
My dear sir, you have done wonders. The horse looks very fit and well. It never went better in its life. I owe you 1,000 apologies for having doubted your ability. You have done me a great service by recovering my horse. You would do me a greater still if you could lay your hands on the murderer of John Straker. I have done so, said Holmes quietly. The Colonel and I stared at him in amazement. You have got him? Where is he then? He is here. Here? Where? In my company at the present moment. The Colonel flushed angrily. I quite recognise that I am under obligations to you, Mr. Holmes, said he, but I must regard what you have just said as either a very bad joke or an insult. Sherlock Holmes laughed. I assure you I have not associated you with the crime, Colonel, said he. The real murderer is standing immediately behind you. He stepped past and laid his hand upon the glossy neck of the thoroughbred. The horse? Cried both the Colonel and myself. Yes, the horse, and it may lessen his guilt if I say that it was done in self-defence, and that John Straker was a man who was entirely unworthy of your confidence. But there goes the bell, and as I stand to win a little on this next race, I shall defer a lengthy explanation until a more fitting time.
The year is 1733 in the month of September. A fox races across the countryside, hotly pursued by baying hounds.
29-year-old Farley speeds across the landscape on his horse, his friend just ahead of him. They see the fox in the distance, the hounds are gaining on it, and it vanishes under the cover of some trees. The wind changes and the sound of the excited dogs can just be heard over the sound of the horse's hooves. The hounds follow suit, and one by one they stream into the canopy. Farley, spurring his mount to a furious gallop, gains on his friend and shouts a challenge at him. I will beat you! His friend, not hearing the words but knowing his fellow well, laughs as he picks up speed. Farley watches as his familiar hunting partner widens the gap between them and approaches the tree line. And then he's out of sight. The chestnut horse he is riding feels strong and steady beneath him, and he flies in between 2 trees with low branches. In front he spots a line of bushes and heads straight for them. Over the thrum of pounding on the ground and the rushing of the wind in his ears, he hears a muffled cry to his left. Yes, Thomas, he thinks, I will catch you up. He hears it again. The horse breaks through the bushes with no effort, and then Farley sees it. A wide, white, open space, dotted with green. He cries out in fear, and using all of his strength, he desperately pulls at the horse's reins. But it's too late. His horse jumps, attempting to clear the pit. For a split second, Farley feels like he's floating, and then gravity pulls at him as his horse flails and screams and falls. Thomas, having seen the whole, watches in horror as he cries again in futility, Beware, chalk pit! The rider behind Farley sees the danger and brings his horse to a stop before blowing his horn and calling the hounds back. The fox, having reached a tall mound on the landscape, looks back for a split second before running down the hill and out of sight, safe this time. Farley St. John, a previous High Sheriff of Hampshire, had only recently inherited his family estate, that of Dogmersfield Park in northeast Hampshire. However, he also had ancestral links here at Farley Chamberlain, just over a mile away. Not much is really known about the day of the hunt, or why Farley missed the chalk pit and went flying over its edge on the back of his horse. Or even if his name is pronounced Farley, but it sounded better than Paulette to me, so that's what I went with. I did take a little bit of artistic licence there, but what we do know can be found at Farley Mount. I was unable to find out exactly when this monument was erected, but it likely wasn't too long after the events in question. Now, I say events, plural, because the day of the hunt was not the end of this story. There are two identical plaques on the monument at Farley Mount. One is on the outside and the other on the inside.
So the plaque reads, "Underneath lies buried a horse, the property of Farley St. John Esquire, that in the month of September 1733 leapt into a chalk pit 25 feet deep, a fox hunting, with his master on his back."
So, buried underneath my feet is the horse of Farley St. John, which on that day many years ago was ridden by his master into a deep hole in the ground. So the horse must lay where it fell, right? Well, no. Next to another reason, which we'll get to shortly, it's thought that this mound may well have been a round barrow, a prehistoric burial site, much like others which are located in the local area, although this is debated. But either way, it's unlikely there was a chalk pit here, and I can't find any evidence of that. At least not on this exact spot, anyway.
Now, I am not wishing to compare myself to Sherlock Holmes in any way, shape or form. However, I have managed to track down an old chalk pit. So, my dear Watson, let's go and see if we can find it.
On this OS map from 1895, we can clearly see the monument here. But over here, there is a chalk pit, which by the late 19th century is already old and out of use. The key for it still exists on the modern map, but without the description.
Watson, dear boy, I fear in my haste I have made a blunder. It would appear I am not appropriately dressed for the occasion. Okay, so according to my detective skills, there should be an old chalk pit in that direction, not too far away. And there is currently a nice little path going in that direction, and no fences. This is a good thing. So let's see what we can find. There's actually quite a bit of chalk on the ground. Sort of everywhere, really. Right, where is this era pit? Okay, by my calculation, it should be just here. There it is. I mean, it's very, very overgrown now. But that is a chalk pit, and I can't really get any closer than that. Otherwise I might end up falling down there myself. Somebody put a monument up for me. And it looks as if it would have possibly been about the right depth, to be honest. It's very overgrown, so it's difficult to tell, but it's possible that it was actually the right depth. I don't know how big, I don't think it is very big. It looks steeper over the other side there. So, there we go. Is it the chalk pit in question? I don't think we're really ever going to know the answer to that question. However, I have discovered something. I now have a newfound appreciation for what it must have been like being a woman many centuries ago when you were wearing dresses and skirts in the countryside.
Now, at this point, those of you with a magnifying glass to your keen eye may well have noticed that I didn't read the rest of the plaque. Some of you are no doubt wondering what happened to Paulet, and others still are clearly thinking, what on earth does all this have to do with Sherlock Holmes and a racehorse? Let's go back to the monument. So, rider and horse have both fallen into a deep chalk pit. But what happens next?
And in October 1734, he won the Hunter's Plate on Worthy Downs and was rode by his owner and entered in the name of Beware Chalk Pit. And there's a little bit more added at the bottom here, and it says, the above being the words of the original inscription were restored by the Right Honourable Sir William Heathcote, Baronet, September AD 1870.
So, both rider and horse survived that fall. And they didn't just survive, apparently, they thrived. So much so that the following year they won the Hunter's Race at the renowned racetrack on Worthy Down, just outside Winchester. And this wasn't just any old racetrack. This racetrack was well known enough that even after it closed down, it inspired none other than Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to use it as a vital location in his well-known Sherlock Holmes story about a murder and a missing racehorse. In the story, the race is called the Wessex Cup, but the location that it's based on was the racecourse at Worthy Down. Like the famous Silver Blaze, Paulet's horse also won the race, and thankfully, in both cases, the horses survived their ordeals. And maybe you will agree with me that Paulet's horse, being real and all, and surviving such an ordeal, and very likely saving the life of its master by breaking his fall, deserves its adventures to be told. So, the next time you see a horse or a large hole in the ground, remember, beware chalk pit.